There was a time when I had a lot of money and a lot of time, and I thought, what the hell, I'll go do something, you know? And Dolly and I we used to laugh about it.
By the time Kenny Rogers spent his final day at home in Sandy Springs, Georgia, he had built a career that spanned roughly 6 decades. Yet that last day was remarkably ordinary. Wanda Rogers later recalled that they watched movies together and shared his favorite dessert, vanilla ice cream with chocolate sauce. The story of why those simple moments mattered begins much earlier. On September 23, 2014, during AXS TV's The Big Interview with Dan Rather, Rogers revealed the fear that stayed with him. Before the canceled farewell performances, the May 2019 Georgia hospitalization, and his March 20, 2020, death at home under hospice care, what fear did Kenny Rogers confess? The fear he named before the end. The thought of never seeing what Justin and Jordan would become was the part that could still bring Kenny Rogers to tears. During a September 23, 2014, interview with veteran television journalist Dan Rather on AXS TV's The Big Interview, Rogers admitted that imagining life ending before he could watch his twin sons grow into men was almost too much to talk about. The conversation took place at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville. Rogers was 75, approaching his 76th birthday, and the discussion wasn't centered on a medical crisis. Instead, it became something far more personal. After decades of success, awards, and sold-out concerts, the thing weighing on him most wasn't another hit record. It was time. Justin and Jordan were 10 years old then. Rogers told Rather that the boys still held hands when they walked into unfamiliar places, a small detail that revealed how close they were. He described them as each other's support system, 2 brothers who naturally looked after one another. Those ordinary moments mattered because he knew they wouldn't stay little forever. Rogers also reflected on his family life with Wanda. He said they had been together for 22 years and married for 17. Becoming a father again later in life had changed the way he measured success. Instead of thinking about another tour or another achievement, he found himself thinking about birthdays, graduations, and the everyday lessons he still hoped to share. One lesson mattered especially to him. Rogers said he wanted enough time to pass along some of the wisdom his own mother had given him. He wasn't talking about fame or the music business. He was talking about the values that parents quietly pass on to their children through years of conversations and shared experiences. The possibility that he might not have enough years left to do, that was what could choke him up. Then the conversation turned to another fear. Rogers explained that he also hoped his sons would never have to watch him linger through prolonged invasive medical care. He wasn't describing a diagnosis, predicting how his life would end, or saying that doctors had told him his time was short. This was an end-of-life concern, the kind of question many people begin to think about as they grow older. For Rogers, it was inseparable from being a father. If you knew your time with 2 10-year-old sons might be limited, would you keep touring or begin planning your exit? That interview revealed something the public couldn't yet see. Before the farewell tour had even begun, Rogers had already started measuring the future less by concert dates than by moments with his family. Within a year, that private realization would shape one of the biggest decisions of his career. He chose to begin leaving the road, not simply to retire, but to reclaim something he believed mattered even more. What did retirement give his family that touring never could? The family time. The road had taken away. Retirement gave Kenny Rogers something that decades on the road never could: ordinary Saturdays with his family. Wanda Rogers later shared what those weekends looked like, and they're almost startling in their simplicity. They called it Super Saturday. The day began with breakfast at McDonald's, continued with a trip through the car wash, and usually ended at Chuck E. Cheese. For one of the biggest stars in country music, those routine outings became some of the moments he valued most. Wanda later described Rogers as an ordinary, unpretentious father at home. That picture stands in sharp contrast to the performer millions knew. On stage, he was the voice behind countless hits, playing to packed arenas around the world. At home, he was simply Dad, enjoying the same places many families visit every weekend. Those quiet traditions help explain what he had been talking about during his 2014 conversation with Dan Rather. He wasn't just hoping for more years, he wanted more ordinary days. That goal became public on September 28, 2015. At 77 years old, after recording more than 65 albums, Rogers announced that he planned to stop touring after one final world tour. According to his retirement announcement, the decision centered on his wife, Wanda, and their two sons, Justin and Jordan. He said he wanted to spend more time with them while he still could. Notice what he didn't say. He wasn't walking away because he had lost his love for performing. He wasn't disappearing from public life overnight. Instead, he announced one last tour that would allow him to say goodbye properly while preparing for a different kind of life at home. That farewell was named The Gambler's Last Deal. It began in the spring of 2016 and continued through 2017, giving fans around the world opportunities to see him one more time. The 2015 announcement marked the beginning of retirement, not its immediate completion. Rogers was still performing, but he had already decided where his future was headed. Looking back, the connection to his 2014 interview becomes clear. He couldn't decide how much time remained in his life, but he could decide where that time would be spent. Every concert he chose not to book meant another breakfast with his sons. Every week off the road meant another chance to pass along the lessons he had once said came from his own mother. Those family rituals reveal what Rogers believed he was preserving, but retirement still had one public chapter left to play out. He promised fans a proper farewell, and on October 25, 2017, Nashville delivered a celebration that looked like the perfect ending. Dolly Parton stood beside him under the lights. The audience believed they were witnessing the final goodbye, and yet the journey wasn't actually over. If that unforgettable night wasn't the true end of the road, what happened next? The arena. Goodbye that looked final. The farewell everyone remembers took place on October 25, 2017, but it wasn't actually the end of Kenny Rogers' touring career. That night, thousands of fans gathered at Bridgestone Arena, 501 Broadway in Nashville, for a celebration that looked like the perfect closing chapter, even though scheduled tour dates still remained. The official event, All In for the Gambler, Kenny Rogers' farewell concert. Celebration honored a career that had stretched for approximately 60 years. It wasn't simply another concert. It was designed as a public thank you to an artist whose songs had become part of the soundtrack of several generations. The lineup reflected that legacy. Lionel Richie, Reba McEntire, Chris Stapleton, Alison Krauss, Little Big Town, The Judds, Idina Menzel, and many others took the stage to celebrate Rogers. The event also benefited the T.J. Martell Foundation and the Kenny Rogers Children's Center, connecting the evening to causes that mattered beyond the music itself. Still, everyone knew the moment the audience had been waiting for. When Dolly Parton walked onto the stage, the arena erupted. Few musical partnerships had become as beloved as theirs, and this would be the last time they would ever perform together in front of a live audience. They sang You Can't Make Old Friends, a song that carried extra meaning given the occasion, before returning to the duet that had defined their partnership, Islands in the Stream. It was a fitting farewell between two artists whose friendship had lasted for decades. There was no need to manufacture emotion. The significance came from knowing that one of country music's most recognizable duos was sharing a stage together for the final time. But there is an important distinction in the timeline. This was Rogers' major public farewell celebration, and his final live performance with Dolly Parton. It was not, however, his final scheduled performance as a touring artist. His world tour, The Gambler's Last Deal, still had dates remaining. That detail matters because it changes how we understand everything that followed. The audience left believing they had witnessed a carefully planned ending. In many ways, they had. Rogers had chosen the city, shared the stage with longtime friends, and celebrated 6 decades of music exactly as he hoped. Yet, the road itself was not finished. His itinerary continued beyond Nashville, and the final stop on his farewell tour still lay ahead. If you were choosing your final public memory, would you want the entire arena celebration or one last duet with the friend who shared your biggest crossover hit? That night gave fans the image they would remember most: Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton standing together under the lights, one final time. Yet the most difficult part of the story came after the applause faded. Less than 6 months later, medical advice would interrupt the farewell he had carefully planned, leaving part of the tour unfinished. Just how much of that goodbye was still waiting when his health forced the final decision? 8 shows left. 8 performances were still on Kenny Rogers' schedule when his farewell tour came to an unexpected end. On April 5, 2018, the 79-year-old singer announced that he was canceling the remaining dates of The Gambler's Last Deal after doctors advised him to stop performing and focus on recuperation. That announcement changed the meaning of everything fans had seen in Nashville just a few months earlier. The October 25, 2017 farewell celebration had looked like the closing chapter of a carefully planned career. In reality, Rogers still intended to finish the tour on his own terms. According to the public statement released by his representative, Rogers had experienced a series of health challenges. Those were the exact words shared with the public. The statement did not identify a specific illness, and it did not suggest that he had received a terminal diagnosis. What it did confirm was that his doctors believed the remaining performances should be canceled so he could recover. ABC News reported that Rogers' medical team expected a positive outcome, but they still advised him against returning to the stage. That detail matters because it separates what was officially confirmed from later speculation. The public knew he was dealing with health issues serious enough to end the tour. They were not told one underlying cause. The timing made the decision especially difficult. The Gambler's Last Deal had begun in 2016 and was meant to be Rogers' final opportunity to thank audiences around the world. According to the Los Angeles Times, only 8 performances remained. The scheduled final stop was set for August 25, 2018, at the Livewire Festival in Blackpool, United Kingdom. Rogers himself acknowledged how long the goodbye had already lasted. He said he had spent approximately 2 years saying farewell to fans. That wasn't an exaggeration. Between the retirement announcement, the farewell tour, and the Nashville celebration, he had devoted years to ending his career with intention and gratitude. Then his health took that final decision out of his hands. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't simply that concerts were canceled. It was that Rogers had tried to control the ending of a career that had spanned roughly 6 decades, only to discover that some endings cannot be scheduled. The road ended sooner than he intended, not because he changed his mind, but because his doctors told him it was time to stop. The canceled tour dates closed the curtain on his performing career, but they did not end public concern about his health. Nearly 14 months later, reports became serious enough that Rogers' own team issued an unusual statement from a Georgia hospital. It was meant to calm worried fans by explaining that he was rebuilding his strength. Instead, it became one of the last major verified updates before the final chapter of his life. What happened behind those hospital doors in May 2019? The hospital statement that tried to calm everyone. The update was meant to reassure fans, not alarm them. On May 31, 2019, Kenny Rogers' representatives confirmed that the 80-year-old singer had been admitted to a local Georgia hospital for treatment of dehydration. They also explained that he remained there for physical therapy so he could rebuild his strength before being discharged. The statement arrived because rumors about Rogers' condition had spread far beyond the confirmed facts. His team addressed what they called wild misinformation and speculation, making it clear that the reports circulating publicly did not reflect the information they wanted fans to rely on. They also struck an optimistic tone. The statement said Rogers was working toward recovery and expressed hope that he would remain with his fans for years to come. At that point, there had been no public announcement of hospice care, no public terminal diagnosis, and no indication that his death was imminent. It's also important to separate what was confirmed from what wasn't. Dehydration was the reason given for the hospitalization. The statement did not explain what had caused the dehydration, and it did not connect it to any specific underlying illness. Because of that, dehydration should not be treated as the cause of Rogers' death months later. Those are two separate events in the timeline. Physical therapy also deserves a brief explanation. In this context, it simply meant supervised rehabilitation designed to help Rogers regain strength before leaving the hospital. It was part of his recovery plan, not evidence of a particular diagnosis. The timing adds another layer to the story. More than a year had passed since doctors had ended his farewell tour in April 2018. Fans had heard very little about his health during that period, which helps explain why speculation spread so quickly when news of the hospitalization emerged. His representatives tried to replace uncertainty with verified information. And, for a time, that seemed to be the last word. Which detail would have worried you more at the time? The dehydration itself, or the need for physical therapy before he could leave the hospital? The statement closed on a hopeful note, and then the public timeline grew quiet. Fewer than 10 months later, on March 20, 2020, Rogers' family announced that he had died at home under hospice care. The official announcement explained how he died. Wanda Rogers later revealed something different: how they spent his final day together. Why did those ordinary moments become a part of the story that stayed with so many people? Movies, ice cream, and the goodbye that came later. The answer wasn't found in a concert hall. It was found at home. On March 20th, 2020, Kenny Rogers died at the age of 81 at his home in Sandy Springs, Georgia. His representative, Keith Hagan, announced that Rogers had died from natural causes while under hospice care and surrounded by family. Hospice describes the kind of care someone receives near the end of life. In simple terms, it focuses on comfort and support rather than curative treatment. It does not identify a specific underlying disease, and in Rogers' case, the official public cause remained natural causes. The formal announcement told the public when and where Rogers died. Wanda Rogers later filled in the deeply personal details of the day itself. She recalled that the family spent those final hours together watching movies at home. They also shared Kenny's favorite dessert, vanilla ice cream with chocolate sauce. There was nothing elaborate about it, no carefully staged farewell, just a family spending time together in the ordinary way they had hoped they still could. Wanda also preserved those memories in her journal. That small detail gives the story much of its emotional weight. Years earlier, Rogers had chosen to step away from touring because he wanted more time with Wanda, Justin, and Jordan. In the end, his final day reflected exactly the kind of family life he had worked to reclaim. The timing brought another unexpected challenge. Because of the COVID-19 emergency, the family could only hold a small private service at first. The larger public memorial they had hoped for simply wasn't possible under the restrictions in place at the time. His musical legacy continued almost immediately. On March 27, 2020, 7 days after his death, Capital Nashville sent Goodbye, a song written by Lionel Richie, to country radio. Although the release carried new emotional meaning, it was not a recording made during Rogers' final days or hospice care. That distinction became even clearer with the release of Life is Like a Song on June 2nd, 2023. Wanda Rogers curated and executive produced the 10-track collection, which included 8 previously unreleased recordings and 2 rarities. According to the official record label, the songs had been recorded between 2008 and 2011. They were archival performances, not final recordings created at the end of his life. Rogers spent decades telling stories through music, but the final chapter of his own life needed very few words. An arena farewell, an unfinished tour, a reassuring hospital statement, and then a quiet day at home with family. In the end, the lasting image wasn't a spotlight or a standing ovation. It was the ordinary life he had retired to protect. Kenny Rogers' farewell tour remained unfinished, but the family time he fought to protect did not. Which stays with you more, the unfinished farewell tour or that simple final day at home? If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts in the comments.